And we are live recording this on the studio here. Thanks very much for joining me today, Steve Remy, for another session of Unscripted. And this is, first of all, welcome back. We've done this before, and you always have some interesting stories to tell. But the reason why I wanted to have you on the show again, because I noticed you've been very busy lately. And you decided to jump into the deep end and become a full-on entrepreneur. And I absolutely love that. And because I have the same passion as you do, and I've always been part of startups in the space and cybersecurity space. So I would love to just ask you why and how and when and all this good stuff. So why don't we get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me back. It's certainly been a couple years, so a lot has changed. Entrepreneur thing, I'll tell you, looking back on my career over the last 20 years, it really screams entrepreneur. But the caveat is it's been with all of these large companies that have had full funding. So if whatever adventure we were embarking on together, if that were to fail, they still had the structure and support of that larger company to fall back on. So yes, it's entrepreneurial in the sense of a very secure area. This is my first true kind of go off on my own. Let's make this work. And quite frankly, it was always in the back of my mind. Will I ever get to that point of starting my own company and such? And the cool piece about it is, while I was comfortable doing what I was doing prior to this, as I started to have conversations with my co-founder, Joe DePaul, it really hit home. It's, wow, this is really, really possible. He really wants to do this. We have some great synergies together. So why not push this forward? And what led us down this route is there's a couple of acquisitions in the IR world. TracePoint got picked up, Palo picked up Crypsis a couple of years ago, and Zurich most recently with Tetra. Sorry, no, that was Arctic Wolf and Tetra, and then Zurich with, I forget who they had picked up. But the Spirit Tip. But the long and short is there's some acquisitions going on, and that shows, one, the cybersecurity industry is still a little immature. Not the Wild West like it was years ago, but it's still a little young. And so there's larger companies that are looking to bring in these talents. Two, I think there's a door opening here because with the movement in the space, with some of the players readjusting their focus with these acquisitions, that'll open the doors. I think there's an opportunity for us to actually step up and build a company that's going to try to fix a lot of the challenges that the insurance companies, specifically the insurance companies, are facing. One, a lot of transparency with our operations. And two, data. Everybody wants data. And so the idea here when Joe and I met was, what are you seeing? What do I see? How do we bring this together? How do we bring this to life? What's it going to be about? Because we just can't be yet another DFIR company. And so that's really the idea of what we came to, how we came to be about, and the core for our idea to move us forward.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I double click on a couple of things that you just mentioned. Is that first and foremost, what I found talking to hundreds of entrepreneurs like yourself, I always hear the same thing. The storyline and the journey is such that they come across a problem throughout their career and did not have an answer per se, or they thought they can do it better. And so a lot of people don't do anything about it. Just they may become a mini entrepreneur inside their company. So they go out to their supervisor or somebody else, another group, and offer a new way of doing things. And sometimes they get resistance. Sometimes they get embraced by the company, but more often than not, nothing happens. But a lot of people like yourself to go out and create something new. But there's a lot of risk associated with it, risk reward. And the problem is, I have to tell you, once you cross that chasm, there's no going back. And I think, Steve, you're probably aware of that. There's no going back. It's very difficult to go back into to be working for someone else. But you have, I think you have a lot in terms of what we do, but you have tremendous experience running incident response teams, following incidents and helping enterprise and so on. So you came in from that world. You were all the way down to the elbows with this stuff. And so you knew exactly what you're getting yourself into, like in terms of, so it's not just like you decided to have an ice cream truck and you never tasted ice cream before. You were making ice cream, you were selling ice cream. You were like cruising around finding ice cream ingredients. You had all of that, and then you tasted 1,000 ice cream cones before you jump into it. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah. Like building your own supply chain pretty much. Yeah, it is. It's interesting because I often said I wouldn't once I got out of IR, I wouldn't get back into it.
Yeah.
But the long and short is, once you think you're out, they pull you right back in. Right. And that's what happened to me. But the interesting piece is that we have the ability to change a lot of the challenges from an operation standpoint. So when we think about the volume of work that ceases to exist, we think about the lack of qualified personnel for all the open cybersecurity positions globally. I'm not saying we're going to solve both of those, but we have the ability to build operations, leverage emerging technologies, pioneer these technologies in lieu of the individual, in lieu of creating a personnel problem. So instead of spending 15 to 20 hours per project just moving data, normalizing data, how do we get the machine to do that for us? How can we look at what some of the issues are with our operations from a personnel? What keeps them awake at night? Literally, what keeps them awake? A lot of it's these threat actor communications. They're staying awake 9, 10, midnight, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. to make sure these messages are being delivered, to make sure we're receiving these decryption keys from the threat actors. And so these individuals, they're not just working a 9-to-5 job. They're working a 9-to-5 job plus all this extra hours to keep the lights on to get these clients back up and running in a timely manner. So we look at how can we automate, how can we build better, not necessarily bigger, but how can we fix, right? We want to do it differently. The team that we've assembled at IronGate all shares the same vision. They all know, they have all come from IR companies that were servicing the insurance community, larger IR companies before that. And they all share the same problem, the same vision, where we don't want to replicate, we don't want to recreate all the same issues we've had. Instead, we have a blank slate to be able to say, we've always had a problem here. How do we go about and fix this? And so now, instead of us just bringing in a new project and doing it the same again, we're taking the steps and the time to think through, these are the steps we've previously taken. Where can we create efficiencies? Where can we actually automate? What's that automation going to entail so that individuals don't need to stay awake 20 hours a day and have to burn off those 4 extra hours of sleep to prepare the reports for our updates for our clients?
So I was about to ask you what it is that you guys do better, but you basically answered that. So that was the inception of the idea to create IronGate, right? To take a process that was very tedious, it was taxing on the people that were doing it, and creating it better. And I'm assuming that the benefits of creating efficiencies and automation and all that would be incurred not just by the people working with you, but also for the clients, because you're able to offer the same quality services at potentially lower or same price, but then maybe in a more timely manner, and then there's less burnout from your staff. So it's overall win for everybody, for your people that are working for you and with you, and then as well as the clients. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, it is. It is. When you leverage the power of the computers, you free up the individual. Now that individual, if they're spending 8 hours on a normal task, their computer might reduce it to 4 hours. They have 4 extra hours now to work directly with the client, to be present, to be in mind, to give them that quality reassurance, that physical, mental reassurance with their consulting, as opposed to today how a lot of companies do it, where they get so bogged down. It's not just that one project they're managing. They have 2, 3, 4, 10 that they're spread across. So it's a yes, this is what we need. Okay, I'll come back and check on you in 2 hours. And in those 2 hours go by, maybe 3 hours go by, they come back and the client's a little upset that, hey, you said 2 hours, it's now 3 hours, or we needed you 20 minutes into the 2 hours, where were you? It's like, oh, I had all these other clients. So really, we don't want to be in a position where we're so overwhelmed that we're not able to deliver that white glove service. We want to be in a position that we have our operations working behind us. And then when you and I are conversing, whatever question you have, I can give you the full attention because I'm not worried about what's happening behind me. I'm giving you the full attention to address your concerns and help you see that there's light after this event.
So walk me through maybe a typical methodology in terms of how you engage with clients, potentially, maybe some stories you can share on the kind of the process, what that looks like and what the experience is like to the clients.
Certainly. Outside of IR, there's 3 categories, right? There's the proactive. There's the businesses that want to improve their cybersecurity. They may not have experienced an event yet, but they want to improve because they know that event's going to come. So that's our kind of a proactive. And that's where we talk about security assessments. We talk about penetration tests. We talk about preparing for the inevitable. And then you have the response services. That's
do you mind if I double click on that one specifically? Just
sure.
How often, because we always say, oh, everybody's always reactive, right? So they always like fix things after the fact. And so in the ideal circumstances, like what you described should be everybody, like should just do this before to either minimize the risk associated or minimize the post breach, the consequence of a post breach and so on. But you're smiling, you're grinning because it doesn't necessarily happen all the time. How do you get these clients to talk to at that stage where shit has not hit the fan and you can talk about what the things that can be improved and prepare them to be more resilient?
It's a great question. It's top of mind with everyone now. A couple of environmental factors at play that are bringing more attention to proactive security. One, insurance. It's harder to qualify for cyber insurance now. The cyber underwriting process is much more focused on finding a lack of controls or a bad sequence of controls. And quite frankly, the underwriters themselves are much more attuned to cybersecurity, whereas 5 years ago, it was a completely different story. So cyber insurance, the qualification thereof is much tougher. So businesses have to adapt. They have to be prepared. Even getting into the brokers understand that qualifying for cyber insurance is a little tougher now. And now they are doing everything they can do to get their clients insurable, insurance ready. So the brokers themselves are actually consulting. They're bringing on their own their own cybersecurity experts, whether in-house or partnering to help their insurers so that they are renewal ready when it comes to the application process. And secondly, there's a lot of regulatory focus in this area. NYDFS just released their updated procedures. The SEC updated procedures went into effect. California is looking at it. There's other states that are now looking at having certain requirements for their residents and scrutiny on their financial information. With all of the regulatory inquiry, with the change in the landscape of cyber insurance, that's putting more emphasis on businesses to strengthen their cybersecurity posture. Yes, it's traditionally been tougher to have a proactive conversation, much easier post-event, but with the move and the change in these environmental factors, we're starting to see a lot more conversation up front to put these businesses in that conversation foothold.
It's a noisy environment though, because let's say I am a risk manager or CISO or somebody who's responsible for security stance of my company. All I have to do is, first of all, I get inundated by LinkedIn messages, people telling me that all you have to do is you have to buy this, or we can offer you this, and then you're good. We're going to reduce your risk to zero. And again, you're smiling because you know it's true. How do you break through that noise and make sure that you don't get lost in the kind of the crowd of folks out there that are peddling cybersecurity solutions?
It's tough, right? Because the same thing in our normal lives, whether we use computers or we own a home or we own a car, we have the same risks, right? Somebody can break into our house. Somebody can break into our car, rummage through it, steal items, or even steal the car itself. It's the same type of security mentality. I'm not going to park my car in some place on the street where there's a high crime rate. I'm going to put it in a parking garage. My home, I'm going to put cameras up. I'm going to put a home security system there. I'm going to make sure my doors are locked. So there's a number of things we can do in our personal lives, our physical lives that we understand because that's how we were taught to think growing up. Computers are a little different. They're a little more personal. I only use my computer. My kids have their own tablets. My wife has her own computer. So I don't have to worry about security when it comes to the person within proximity. But online threats are huge. And when we think about the security aspect of this, really, we have to be able to understand that the threats aren't so much physically present, but they're external to us. And we have to do everything we can to prevent, or at least mitigate, because it will happen. We have to mitigate the success of that attack being actually catastrophic. It might be okay that you click the link in a phishing email because you have 5 layers of defense from the time you click the link to the time the payload gets delivered. Or it's okay that you click the link and you fell for the phishing website and you entered your username and password because you have MFA enabled. You see what I'm saying? That layer of defense piece comes into play. So we have to start thinking that way. So we have to openly engage in these conversations and talk about what meaningful security is. So when you look at large, complex environments, it's not just the fact that you have MFA enabled. You need to have MFA enabled. You need to have a good vulnerability management program. You need to have the ability to detect 0 days from occurring, because you can have MFA on your VPN device. Your VPN can be fully patched, but there's a 0 day that no one knows about that allows an attacker to dump the database, gain unauthorized access to the VPN itself, and now they are fully authenticated on your network, bypassing your MFA. And that's quite a common scenario we've seen with a number of leading products. And the only way around that is to be able to detect that unauthorized access, whether it's having a certificate-based authentication on your asset itself, or if you're looking at certain IP addresses connected, or you're searching by the host name, whatever that authentication or whatever that detection method is, that's a part of your layered defense strategy, because you have MFA, you have vulnerability management, and then you have the ability to detect 0 days on your network to be able to find that and quickly cut the head off that snake before the snake grows too large. So really, we have to think more than just these one-off pieces. We have to think holistically to say every single point attacker can touch, access, or hamper one of our systems. We have to be able to detect that and be able to quickly react so that it doesn't get too bad. Case in point, right? Even by the way, even MSPs are in this picture too. I, as the business, have to do my due diligence to ensure my systems are operational and I'm protecting all my business information. So that includes trusted third parties. So if you have an MSP comes in and your organization suffers a ransomware attack, don't turn those computers off. Don't disconnect them from the network. Just stop the network connectivity, right? Shut the internet off. Let the IR company come in and help build that response procedure so they can collect the data in a timely manner. Quite often we see MSPs that don't believe these attacks can exist, or they don't want to believe that it actually happened to them on their watch, and they shut the computers down and they put them in a storage room. 3, 4, 5 days later, we get brought in, and now we're looking at, okay, how do we get those computers back out of the storeroom? Which computers were they associated to? How did the spread? So now we can't really access the data in a timely manner. Meanwhile, they're going out buying brand new systems, setting new things up, not figuring out what that point of entry was, and they haven't patched it. We haven't figured that out yet. And so now we're opening ourselves up to another attack. Similarly, when we take a step back and we look at the scenario, you have your third-party management, you have business operational procedures you have to follow, you have specific security that you need to embed because of the data types or the type of business you are. That's your first step, figuring out who in your ecosystem. How do you set up your business operation from a security perspective, and looking at who in your ecosystem? And then from there, you look at what the attacker can touch or take. And by the way, that attacker is two persons. One, it could be an insider, and two, it could be the external threat of ransomware or APT. So we have to look at all of this and figure out what's the kind of the universe, what are the easy things to chip away at, what are the longer term strategies, and making sure that if any one of our security controls fail, there's a secondary security control that can catch it and stop that activity from continuing.
Listen to you, Steve. It sounds like you can elevate the conversation, as you mentioned, from a point solution to look at the organization as a whole, understanding the actual processes, the crown jewels, and understanding how to protect those and what's required, and then potentially what to do after the fact. And it's all, if you think about the commercial, you've seen a thing or two, which allows you to talk intelligently and learn from somebody else's experiences. And coming back to our discussion, our original discussion, you mentioned the first piece that you do is the proactive. Mm-hmm. Hey, let's take a look at your security controls and stance or whatever, and then let's figure out a way to make those better. What are the other types of services you provide?
So the second category is the response services. Something's happened. We don't know what it is. It could be as devastating as ransomware, or it could be a knock on your door from the FBI saying, we believe you're going to fall victim to a ransomware attack in the next 48 hours because we intercepted the data. They hand you a CD, a physical CD, and they say, go look, we found your data. We intercepted your data. It could be
CD. Who has a CD-ROM these days, Steve?
Funny, before I was connecting into this, I like using headphones with the microphones, all that. Brand new laptop, brand new docking station, neither have the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. Like, luckily my microphone has an output there. But yeah, exactly. Yeah. The legacy technology, but it's still in use. It's still secure-ish. And that's how a lot of information is transmitted. And it's by design, by the way, because if the FBI was able to intercept that information, that means somebody's in your network doing something. And so if the FBI were to send you an email, send you a link, that's going to tip those attackers off to move a little bit quicker. So it's all by design.
It reminds me of one of the first assignments in one of the basic computer science courses about the difference between a sneaker net, like how is the throughput of a sneaker net versus some of the old, and it's actually much quicker because the CD-ROM has whatever 700 megs or whatever data. At a time, it takes longer to transmit it over the wire, over the speed that we had before, than just somebody physically hand over a CD. And it's, as you mentioned, it's actually much more secure. Then the Russians at some point went back to pen and paper due to the high security associated with physical data.
Yeah, a lot of people have. There's some good breaches of sneaker nets out there. So I think stuck that was one of them.
Yeah. So before we dive into kind of the IR piece, and I would love to pick your brain on that as well, but I'd love to discuss some of the things we've seen since we last spoke. The whole incident response, as well as the techniques and tactics associated with ransomware and so on, evolved in the past several months to a year. And we've seen almost escalation in the volume as well as the tenacity and the impact associated with not just for the actual organization, but as well as their partners. Can you, and the kind of the scale of things have really increased exponentially as well, the impact associated with some of these. And by the way, I had a previous discussion about is cyber insurance, as you mentioned specifically, that's one of the triggers. So there was a, I believe yesterday was the settlement with Merck that they came to a settlement about from a breach that happened with NotPetya back in 2017. And so there's a lot of things going on. Maybe you can bring us up to speed for the people watching this. What's going on in the kind of the incident response world? What's going on with the recent attacks? And you maybe give us a flavor of what's happening, and because you're close to the ground in terms of that.
Sure. These threat actors are much more aware. So when we think about data exfiltration, when we think about the use of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, they are much more attuned to what type of data they stole, your company's financials, who are potential targets within your data that might be able to, they might be able to leverage to force a ransom payment. The NSA just came out and stated and actually confirmed the use of AI by these threat actors to create more realistic phishing emails. We shouldn't expect to see typos. We shouldn't expect to see bad grammar. We shouldn't expect to see punctuation missteps. What we should expect to see is a legit English-sounding person writing this email that you're about to read. The threat actors are much more attuned to where their missteps were previously, or how am I going to coerce this person whose data I just stole, who may not need to buy the decryptor from me? How do I coerce them into actually sending me money? And what we've seen is
Steve,
a couple of things.
Let me just ask you this real quick question, because it's really remarkable. So now we're going to get, so you used to be able to detect a phishing email by, by looking at the grammar, for example, but now we're going to get like a really polished. And so are we going to go back into this saying, hey, if you want to, we want to phish me, you're going to make it look human. So maybe add a couple of spelling mistakes here and there, or because again, you're right. It's using AI to create these like unbelievable polish. We see this every day, like even emails we receive from partners and so on. Everybody started using it, including myself. So the question is, we have to now humanize the communication, or the adversaries are going to have to humanize communication to make it look like more human, as opposed to polish, or somewhere in between. What are your thoughts about that?
So, as the threat actors use polished English, we as business people should use unpolished English.
Or like just yeah, or just have. It doesn't have to be like, but just talk like maybe not grammar, but just talk just the way like a normal person would talk, so that's you. So if I get an email from you and you're like, absolutely, you sound like a university professor, I would say, hey, that's not Steve. It's got to be somebody who's impersonating Steve. Or I would say, or I should say, no, this Steve is a freaking grammar genius. And so, and also, let me ask you this: are there any AI that we use to prevent that? Looking at phishing emails and to be able to detect AI usage from both sides.
Yeah, the AI topic it's so cutting edge. We're pretty much at the infancy of it. Everything from regulation, right? The government is very concerned that exactly this AI can be used for malicious, nefarious purposes, both by the customer of the AI algorithm, large language model, wherever you like to call it, or by the developers of that algorithm. Because the developers can introduce their own bias into how the model's trained. So I, as the user, might get skewed results compared to if I were just to do my own analysis. So there's a number of concerns at the government level with the creation, adoption, and usage of AI. from a business standpoint, from artificial intelligence, how to detect it, it's very difficult, right? There's individuals, there was a LinkedIn, somebody, I forgot who the individual was on LinkedIn, but they were voicing their concerns and opinions about how people are doing cutting and pasting now. Basically, ChatGPT, write me an article with this theme, and then the individual copy it and put that on their blog. And the individual was bold enough to say that they could find or figure out that based on certain words that no normal user would actually use, to your professor comment there, that's how they would determine the article was written by AI. No fault to him. He's got his preference. He likes the human touch. But the kicker of that is there are stories of individuals saying, ChatGPT, write me an article. They take that same text without changing it, give it back to ChatGPT and say, can you tell me if this was written by an AI algorithm? And ChatGPT would be 50-50. I'm not sure, or possibly, or I don't think it was, even though we know it came from there. There's others out there that are exploring other large language models to solve that exact riddle of how can we detect if AI was used to use this. That is, you're talking about hundreds of words in a blog or a book. So you're having a lot of repetition of word usage, certain characteristics of sentence structure. When we look at emails, that's going to be much different, because whenever you get an email that's longer than 3 sentences, I just click unread and I come back to it 4 hours later where I can actually focus on it, right? That's how the majority of business works. If the email's too long, they want a meeting. And that's usually how it comes up. So us to be able to detect the use of AI as a mechanism to clean an email's content so that we can understand it a bit better, that's going to be very difficult. But I guarantee there's companies out there that are researching how to do that in their next iteration of their spam filters and other nefarious use
so
of
many
email.
bots, and even LinkedIn has a ability now to, hey, there's a button to click here to summarize the text, and then you can even create a response. But the question is, who's reading this, right? You have bots or writing for bots, or somebody else is going to read it, and we're starting to block ourselves from the massive. I don't know if anybody's reading these long, obviously crafted, AI crafted LinkedIn posts. Maybe they don't, but it seems like it's becoming, somebody responds to that in the AI format, and so who's reading this? Who's actually going through all of that? And how do you determine what's real or not? It's very difficult. And it's becoming evident that you start to use voice as well. There are engines to basically get phone calls, and it sounds like a human on the other side, but it's not. Typically, you can detect that by certain pauses. I think there's a half a second pause before it responds again. But it sounds quite human. And then there's also the ability to take your voice and replicate that by capturing some of that. And you can do it quite well. So we are starting to get, the level of sophistication is growing, and you can probably agree with me that a lot of these incidents happen from almost basic stuff. Like as you mentioned, maybe not enabling a multi-factor authentication or not patching a system. We're using malware that's 10 years old. Sometimes that it's not. So we're afraid, of course, of the new methods and the AI and, real fake and all that. But it's almost like you come down to basic hygiene a lot of times to be able to protect your organization. And these AI, even though it's concerned, is I would say and it's a top of mind, might not be the best bang for the buck from be able to protect your organization. Is that a correct statement?
It pretty much is. It really boils down to your own situational awareness, in not so much in ransomware stories, but or the use of AI, but in business email compromise, individuals have been tipped off that they're conversing with somebody from a compromised account, even though it's a trusted email account, meaning the threat actor got in to the email account. They've been sending you messages as if they were the actual account owner. So there's no change in email name or domain to what the threat actor is actually controlling that account. And it's by design. What that threat actor does when they get in there, they look at the message history. And so they can cut and paste actual snippets of what that individual was sending to that person. So now they can actually mimic. So it's a very raw form. If you even call that artificial intelligence, it's legit intelligence, but that's what artificial intelligence, the idea of using artificial intelligence for phishing emails. So these individuals that are receiving these emails and say, wait, I just sent the payment. Why do I need to send it again to a new account? Oh no, that's not good. Let me call this person. And so the situational awareness of them to pick up, exactly to your point, different word usage or something that's out of place, and instead of just replying back to the message or sending a new message to that same email address, they're picking up the phone and calling the individual to confirm, hey, I just got this from you. Did you just send this to me? Do you really want me to change those wiring instructions? And 99% of the time, that individual is going to be surprised and say, no, I didn't send that to you. Don't change the wiring instructions. Or, yes, we already received a payment. We didn't send you another invoice. I don't know what you're talking about. That situational awareness is key, right? Having procedures, one, the ability to detect something as a human, where you're not using anything automated there, but having the ability to detect something as a human and then having a set of offline procedures to contact that other party to validate and verify what that transaction should take. Whether AI is in use here, or there's somebody that's taken over an account, it doesn't matter what that technology that's causing it. It's the fact that we can detect it, and by having that situational awareness, not being distracted, by paying attention to those little cues, and then picking up the phone and calling from a trusted number, calling that trusted number to be able to validate what the email is asking you for. That's really what it boils down to. Yeah, AI is going to make it a lot harder to detect those cues, but to the same extent, we're all people, we're all social. We need to be able to pick up the phone with confidence and call someone and step away from the technology just to make sure we're not going to mess anything up.
You got to be careful though. Even in this particular case as well, I heard a case where somebody changed the number on the signature, and then when they called to verify, they wired details and say, yeah, we sent this, and they're basically calling somebody else altogether. So it's all about awareness, as you mentioned, and it's coming down to the human element that is always the kind of the weakest link. Let me ask you this. So luckily the industry is maturing from, as you mentioned, regulatory, the insurance, the cyber insurance, the systems, the vendors, there's a lot of things are changing. What changed specifically for incident response in terms of the tactics being used to eventually, like the idea is to first figure out who attacked you right away, right? To figure out why, what happened, what are the damages, and then first and foremost is to how do you bring you back in order, back to being whole again. So that process, how is it different today than it was, let's say, 12 months ago, 24 months ago, if it is at all?
24 months ago, I think it's still about the same from a response standpoint. When you compare it to be about 5-10 years ago, I think there's vast differences. A lot of which, how fast we respond. 10 years ago, we respond and then we're there for months. We're working alongside the client, really trying to trace whatever tiny little rabbit holes and threads to pull on that we possibly can. Today, given the advancement in computing technology, especially with the way a lot of these operating systems create artifacts and log different system events, there's much more of a finer trail that we can grab and then we can analyze. So today, our investigations are a little bit quicker than they were about 10 years ago. And that started around the release of Windows 7, Windows 10. And then even with Windows 11, there's a lot more information being recorded at an operating system level. So when we respond, we get access to that system, we can tell within hours versus days what systems that might have been used for lateral movement, or what actions the threat actor took on there, where they connected to, how they deployed ransomware. So it's a much quicker conversation to, one, respond, 2, to get the business up and running and recovered, and 3, provide insight from our analyses so that we can understand where that point of entry is, provide our security observations, recommendations to get them moving on in an operational state. So I think we're doing a lot of things a lot quicker now.
And what would you recommend? I know we maybe touched upon it last time, but who would be your ideal customer in a sense that, I wouldn't say customer, just but somebody that you have the best ability to help them? There's got to be certain levels. As you mentioned, one of the things that you touch upon is, hey, don't turn everything off and put it in a storage room. But aside from that, and let's assume that people are listening and nodding and they know not to do this next time, what else can they do? Because it's always, people will say, okay, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So what's the ideal situation from your perspective to be able to come in and assist a client? What do they have to have in order? I think you mentioned that maybe potentially a certain OS and maybe the log function turn on, right? So I would say that's a prerequisite. But what else would you recommend for someone to, again, because you are a partner in this, right? Your incentive and everybody else's incentive to come over and resolve it as soon as possible, because you're happy, the customer is happy, and everybody rides to the sunset. But this have to be certain conditions. And people think, oh no, the IR company wants to prolong the service. And I would say no. They want to help you as quick as possible to get you on your feet. So they are partners in this, right? That's why you mentioned the proactive piece. They want you to actually, if all possible, to never get hacked. So you shouldn't look at the IR company as somebody who's an adversary from a security perspective. No, they're partners. They want you to succeed in the sense that they want you to do business. So maybe you pay them a retainer, but so long story short, the question is, what would you recommend from a company perspective what do they need to have in place in order for you to make your job much more effective if something does happen?
Yeah, great question. So when we look at our services and getting back to the ideal customer, yes, everybody wants to be that proactive. Bring us in as early as possible. Let us get to know you. You get to know us. We understand your environment. We understand your security tooling. We can provide quick recommendations for wins to improve your security. It doesn't have to be year-long consulting engagement. We can be in and out within weeks, and even in smaller environments within days. So there can be answers to be shed. The second piece is, at a minimum, be prepared. It doesn't matter what your security tooling is, just be prepared. Know what to do when you come in and find that your files are encrypted and you have a ransom note on your computer. Know what to do when you found that there's been unauthorized access to your Office 365 email accounts. Know what to do. You don't have to respond. You don't have to be able to go in and do the investigation, collect the data, and do the analysis. Knowing what to do just means we've clear-cut directions from our incident response plan to say, if we detect anything weird that's abnormal, call this number, which should be your cyber insurance, and then call IronGate or call your breach coach. Have that clearly laid out. So whether it's a small company or a mega large company, you have clear-cut procedures to be able to say, if this event happens, these are the steps we need to follow. And that's something simple that we can come in. It's called an IR readiness assessment. It's to understand if you have the ability to perform any type of incident response. And if you do, what are your capabilities? What are your limitations? How can you have partners come to help you to augment? We're an extension. At that point, their problem is our problem. We want to make sure they get through it as quickly as possible. And we're there both as a teacher and a mentor, as well as an expert, as well as the fact finders. And sometimes we're a shoulder to cry on if they need that. But the long and short is, we come in, we perform that IR readiness assessment. We point out we point out security tooling that they benefit from. We'll point out clarity to their incident response plan. And then we'll also leave behind a little go bag for them so that if something does happen, they know exactly what to do, when to do it. And that includes calling the phone numbers. So back to don't turn your computers off. We can tell the system administrators if they're running a VM environment, a hypervisor, a VMware or Microsoft, whatever it might be, we can tell the system administrator, if any of your VMs get compromised, don't turn them off. Just isolate those systems on their own VLAN with no internet connectivity. When we show up, we will deploy our EDR tool to those systems. We'll connect them back to the internet, and then we'll be able to manage those systems from our EDR console. And that is going to be a quicker win than them powering them down and risk not being able to power them back up because of how aggressive the ransomware is. Same thing with business email, right? If having steps in place, going back to the wire transfer instructions, if they at any point they detect anything abnormal that isn't part of that conversation, they should be able to pull up a piece of paper. Again, piece of paper, not an actual Word file, because that Word file could be tampered with to your exact point of the email signature. That piece of paper has their incident response instructions on there. I need to change my passwords. I need to make sure I have MFA enabled on this account. I need to make sure that I have POP and IMAP disabled, because if those two legacy protocols are not disabled and we enable MFA and we don't change the password, they'll still be able to backdoor bypassing MFA through POP and IMAP. And by the way, those are two protocols that require syncing. That means the entire mailbox will get downloaded to that attacker-controlled system. So knowing what to do, how to do it, when to do it from a containment standpoint is absolutely critical. And in the off chance they don't have the ability or technical know-how and they have an MSP, and we brought in for the IR readiness, we're also going to include that MSP as part of the IR readiness to make sure we know who's going to do what and when. And that's the most critical piece, is being organized and prepared. Having that organization up front will drastically reduce the amount of time it takes us to help them recover.
And I believe some of that relates to quote unquote muscle memory, or just to be able to know exactly what to do. And because a lot of it, there's a term also in the military, right? Because when something happens, you don't want to think about what you're going to be doing. You want to instinctively just do something. And in this particular case, you know exactly who to call, what to do. And there's no question about, because again, it's very stressful. Maybe if your business is now compromised and your operation is halted, the last thing you want to do is start to think through what do you need to do. You want to have everything in place and potentially have do you remember that Amazon used to sell, I don't know if they still do, those buttons where you press on it and you order
I remember those, yeah.
Like a pod, like a detergent or something, you put it in the washing machine. Maybe there's something to be said about a panic button. There's an IronGate panic button that you have on your desk, and it's like a little thing, you press on it and then immediately it cascades a set of activities. Maybe you can patent that. Have
that'd be awesome. We'd have to go in on that together.
An IronGate panic button where automatically it will cascade, we'll start calling and do all this necessary actions to start putting things in motion.
Yeah, it's funny. So some organizations do have something like that. It's not out of the box, but they do prepare essentially a panic button style. There's something going on. Let's push this button. And through their security orchestration automation, that initiates a series of cascading events, a lot of which is sending an email and creating a case and then getting the IR team or the crisis management team brought together. So there are some automation pieces like that. At this point, I don't think there's any one company that's created a panic button. There are some really cool emerging technologies, Spectrum Labs being one of them, where they are trying to solve that kind of immediate scheduling need, where you, instead of calling your insurance company's on their platform, and you can open up a claim with them. And at the same time you open the claim, that notifies the IR company and that notifies the breach coach. So you're notifying three entities at once. Whereas today it's an email or it's a phone call, and then it's a cascading chain of events to get everybody on a phone call hours later. The insured would be able to actually log in, open up a ticket, and then bring all these parties on a call. And so you have one fact-finding call together. Again, very infant in what they're doing, but it's really a huge disruptor compared to the operations we've established over the last 10 or so years working for the insurance community.
Yeah, and time is of the essence. A lot of times the time associated with responding, and we're running out of time. I don't know if you have a few more minutes, but time is of the essence, not just from an operational perspective, but also what happened typically is that the executives they're just you have you on a speed dial trying to figure out what it is that is happening and want answers, and that is super stressful. If anybody came out to this situation, I'm sure you were rubbing shoulders with people who were in that position, and it's not fun. There's nothing fun about being under stress between a rock and a hard place in terms of something that's happening. It's probably the worst case scenario for anybody who's in that position, that everybody is looking for you for answers and you don't have them. And it's one thing to get into, if something happens, if you can very quickly bring down the situation to under control and figure what is the impact to the business and who is impacting us, and then potentially what are the steps to bring us back, you are in a way better place than you are without providing any answers. I think that's the key, and that's why you need somebody like yourself and IronGate to provide that. We ran out of time. This was super beneficial, and I'm really happy that we get a chance to talk. What's the easiest way for people to reach out to you to learn more about what you guys do and potentially just get some consultation from you?
Yeah, our website's probably the best place, IronGateSecurity.com. Head up there. We have all of our services listed. There's a lot of thought leadership articles written by our team posted up there as well. You can contact us through the website. We have a phone number, and we have our intake, or I think it's a web form up there. So feel free to reach out to us there. Otherwise, you can email me directly, stephen.ramey@IronGateSecurity.com, and that's Stephen with a PH.
Fantastic. So thank you again for joining me today. Much appreciated, and looking forward to having additional conversations. Maybe what we should do is we'll come out with some incidents that happened. There's so many of them. It's almost like you can't keep up. And I'll get your expert opinion as an expert on the show to analyze what happened, what was done as an afterthought or after the fact, and then what they could have done better if that's the case, with your permission. So until then, thank you very much for joining me today. Much appreciated. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. And until then, stay safe online as well as offline. And take care.
Thank you, David. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.